The name of our journal, Agitate Unsettling Knowledges, was inspired by a collective, polyvocal, asymmetrical, fluid, and open-ended creativity that was first seeded in a class on caste, race, and indigeneity in spring of 2016. In that class, convened by our very own Richa Nagar, several of us first learned about Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's call to educate, agitate, organize, and felt compelled to answer his calling. We envisioned the journal as a space to actively learn, mobilize, and create, a meeting ground of curiosities and struggles, of dreaming, grappling, and creating that dares to question everything mainstream. The project is anchored in fundamental questions on the ethics, aesthetics, poetics, and politics of knowledge and knowledge production. We ask, what is regarded as knowledge and at what cost? Who is deemed as a maker of knowledge, and who is reduced to the status of his passive recipient? What happens to the content, form, purpose, and ownership of knowledge when we intentionally commit ourselves to shifting everything that we've been taught to take for granted, everything that we've been taught to accept as the natural order of things? Who do we learn to hold ourselves accountable to when we attempt to shake, stretch, bend, break, and agitate with and against dominant systems of producing and legitimizing knowledge?
We embraced agitate as a verb,
as a call to action,
as an insatiable agitation,
as a dynamic process, always in movement, always open to movements, in search of justice.
And this dynamism percolates through our collective dreams, our commitments, our processes, and relationships. Agitate is outward facing. The creative expressions that find a home within the virtual pages of this journal seek to agitate our audiences, our collaborators, our disciplines, and our institutions. For example, the project has pushed us to reimagine our contributors and our audiences beyond members of the Academy who dwell in fluorescent lit offices behind the brick walls of familiar educational institutions. Liberating ourselves from such predictability, our evolving search and labors have created their own audiences, serendipitously, in ways that destabilize the imposed compartmentalization between academia, the arts, activism, and everyday life. This reorientation invites us to grapple with what it means to undiscipline ourselves in search of justice. Simultaneously, it's also offered an invitation for us to embrace translation as a responsibility, to translate ourselves to, between, and across the communities and the issues that we agitate with, in, and for. And it's also invited us to accept that which can never enter the realm of translation. Agitating as an outward force also emboldens us. We insist on carving out and claiming space for ourselves and our community members, pushing against institutional claims over our ever-evolving spaces, communities, commitments, and labors.
One concrete practice that has emerged from this reimagination is our process of review that seeks to build community while agitating against hierarchy. An ever unfolding process, our review strives for open and evolving relationships among contributors, reviewers, and the creative work that is evolving. We emphasize the process of co-imagination and co-creativity even as we look forward to the end product of a review. We work to linger with and learn from the tensions rather than hurrying to eliminate them. We learn from ridges and furrows that come from leaving things unresolved in their complexity, and we allow each new contribution to reshape what we imagine our process and relationships to be. Another concrete commitment that has grown from this in conversation with the University of Minnesota libraries is a commitment to open access, to being a home for freely accessible content that is rooted in publishing practices of the Creative Commons. At the same time, we dream about what the politics, poetics, and praxis of Creative Commons could mean beyond the current conventions. How can we continue to become a Creative Commons that emphasizes reciprocity and nourishes deep collaborations with those who think and create in ways that unsettle prevailing norms? This commitment makes our review process an ever-flowing stream in search of new grounds that can liberate us from the conventional languages, protocols, and structures of review that create hierarchies, that judge, and that discipline.
AGITATE is inward facing. Our editorial processes, collective building, and creative work are ever forming in ways that are intimately entangled with our unfolding journeys, shifting locations, and growing political commitments. Over the last 6 years, we've grown together and separately with all the joys and pains, possibilities, and improbabilities that come with breaking through shells and shedding old skin. We continue to go through the ups and downs of handling our own expectations and limitations, embracing emotions. Working collectively, we are cognizant of our needs as individuals to thrive within this collective. The delicate dance that we perform every day between the I and we recognizes that this we is a necessarily fraught term. Yet the emerging tensions become fertile soil for deep reflections and generative transformations. Time and again, we find ourselves returning to the very questions we began this journey with. How do we go about building and growing this platform? How do we work with our inherently limited capacities and energies, our unique ways of engaging and relating with each other and with the communities that we stand in solidarity with, near and far? And tied to our shifting locations and different situations, what obligations and responsibilities do we carry? How do we honor our histories, geographies, the peoples, languages, struggles that have made us, the specific violences that each one of us is implicated in?
We've grappled with our tagline of unsettling, of agitate unsettling knowledges. Firstly, in confronting the tension of using the word unsettle, given our entanglements with the University of Minnesota, an R1 land-grant university responsible for the ongoing theft and occupation of Dakota homelands. We've asked ourselves, what does it mean to take seriously the histories and present realities of the land on which we stand? As we continue to expand and deepen our reflections on what it means to unsettle, we come to this project of unsettling in the context of many intertwined settler colonialisms and colonialisms unfolding all over the world. We continue to complicate the question of where we stand through the multiple locations of our community, some of which are shared, but many of which are not. And we continue to grapple with what it means to do the work of unsettling across multiple sites, movements, and entanglements.
But to talk about unsettling in isolation from agitate and knowledges is to constrain it. What does it mean for agitate to unsettle? Specifically, how do we advance collective struggles toward a creative and political unsettling? Unsettling for us is to interrogate and disrupt norms in order to create spaces for different ways of being, creating, learning, evolving, struggling, and living. It involves unsettling values and value systems around what gets to count as knowledge, where knowledge emerges from, and in what forms. In agitating, we ask, what new practices of co-learning and knowledge making might emerge in our bringing together of contributors, languages, art, imaginations, memories, and campaigns? Such a search has taught us to place our emphasis on building collaborations and coalitions with other organizations and struggles, to destabilize knowledge practices and pedagogies that are taken for granted, and to develop accessible resources that amplify and celebrate collective knowledge production.
Knowledges, always in the plural. When we embarked on this journey, our collective focused on the struggles of graduate students, insisting on rejecting the disciplinary authority of dominant epistemic structures, narrow imaginations, and poor languages, animating the particular expectations of established academic journals and the so-called blind review process. As the journey unraveled, though, we learned to keep pushing, extending, and growing our dreams and desires beyond this starting point. If AGITATE was located in the academy, but did not want to be defined by the academy or even become of the academy, who did we want to bring into our community? What kind of energies do we need to harness to ensure that the knowledges erased, invisibilized, and marginalized can be resuscitated? That the stories, lives, and languages of those often reduced to raw material to be consumed elsewhere, to data points on clean, colorful graphs on some PowerPoint slide deck can flourish? And how can AGITATE become a space and force that advances work in new ways? We reached out to peers, colleagues, friends, allies, and community members in and outside of academia, folks who inspired and challenged us, while others reached out to us. We walked together with our co-travelers, with the stories they wanted to tell, and the solidarities they wanted to build through their words and colors, their rhythms and beats, their memories and performances, their movements and campaigns.
In learning to become co-travelers with each contributor, we've grown in our imagination and vision and action. We've formed close relationships with these co-travelers and figured out ways in which our partnership could embody co-authorship as a sharing of authority so that their imprints could transform the pages of AGITATE through what we chose to represent and how we represented the bodies of knowledge that are often invisibilized and pushed to the margins of prominent platforms. In doing so, we've searched for a deeper, more abiding relationship with each of our contributors than the one that typically begins with an author or an artist submitting to a journal and then being shaped by the review process and often ends with the publication. Rather, with AGITATE, the journey with each contributor and each piece becomes a journey of dreaming a new dream and then finding a way to live that dream through AGITATE.
So materially, we've had very limited resources at our disposal, but we never let that come in our way. In fact, we have learned that the biggest resource we can make for ourselves is our relationships and co-creativity, born of a radical love which thrives in critique, even as it agitates to keep dreaming and growing together. We strive to become a space, a platform, and a community whose imagination and possibilities can never be bound by what we already know. With all those who step into our universe, we learn to become co-hosts, co-authors, co-critics, co-poets, co-researchers, and co-artists. Together with our authors and audiences, we open ourselves to boundless forms, languages, and visions through which we can agitate and unsettle our knowledges and our worlds in search of socio-political, poetic, and epistemic justice.